So, curing bad communication. Now, in my mind, I'm dealing with in general, okay? So, we'll get to the application at the end, but just kind of hang tough with me. Bad communication. Um, what's wrong? I'm not sure why this is wrong. So, what is wrong with communication? What goes awry? If you've lived at all, you'll know that there's something amiss, and there's complex reasons or more fundamental reasons behind it. But what I want to stress is that people often aren't clear. They get emotional. They try to win by defeating them. So I'm going to talk about us and them, me and you, etc. So the other side, and they try to win by avoiding them. These are common things that happen, and it creates a heck of a problem for us because if you're not clear, there's not good communication. If you get emotional and it's about the emotion, then it's not about the communication. And generally, when we get heightened in our emotions, um, maybe not with anger, but certainly with anxiety, when our emotions get heightened, what happens to us is we actually shut down our ability to think clearly, um, certainly reasonably. But there's a challenge. Trying to win by defeating them, when you try to win by defeating them, then that aim is adversarial, right? So that's the goal, and I guess there are scenarios for that sort of thing. But I'm talking about interactive human real communication, okay? Not defeating people. And we also a lot of times try to win communication just by avoiding them, avoiding communication, avoiding getting it figured out. So, what is communication? Let's just start there. It's basically you have a sender and a receiver, you and another person. Could be a group to another group or something, an us and them. And this sender receiver communication has some complexity with you encode, you decode, you send it over a channel, etc. But what I want to invite you to do is think about what is the goal? That's the question. What is the goal in the communication process? Is it understanding or is it persuading? You know, you're trying to persuade someone. Is it persuasion? Is it understanding or maybe something else? Is it defeating them or proving that they're wrong? Is that the goal? Is proving I'm right the goal? Same idea, but a little different. And I want to invite you to not forget interference. So this is something in a communication model, but there are a couple of kinds. There can be noise in the environment, just the situation itself, or distractions, or people coming in, or whatever it is. Could be the light's too low and you're trying to show something written. So anything environmental. The other is noise in everyone's head. So you've got noise going on about what you believe, what you don't believe, what you think they're doing, how you're reading their mind, what they think, what they don't think, etc. And by the way, when communication works fine, you're going to see this matches it. I'm not really addressing when it goes well, but this is it. This is why it goes well. I'm trying to address bad communication and how to get past that. If that makes sense. So here's something I want to invite you to keep in mind, that the goal in communication is to win. You've got to understand that. In fact, all of life is pretty much about some kind of goal. Everything you do is some kind of goal. Even that you're listening to this, you have some kind of goal. Well, communication needs a goal too, and this is where the sticking point is. But bottom line, the goal is to win, and we need to be honest about that. Just realize that's the aim. But what is winning? What is it when it's a win? In his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie pointed out that in a way, you can never win an argument, because if you win it, you actually have made a non-friend of the other person, something like that. So we want to spend a little time on what winning is. The goal and definition is everything. As soon as you decide what winning is, everything changes. It's a famous old movie, Rocky, the original one back in the late 70s. And Rocky in Wrestling Through Night Before, spoiler alert, if you hadn't seen it, he's thinking through the fight, and he realizes he can't really defeat Apollo Creed. But what he can do is hang in there with him, kind of tie, and it turned out to be a split decision or whatever. And so winning for him was hanging in there and lasting as much as anything. So all I'm saying is that definition of winning that you have on anything is going to affect stuff. You know, is winning staying in the game, is winning defeating the other person, is winning a sporting event. It's not a win if you don't win by 50 points or something. I don't know. But whatever you define it is going to dictate things to you. So is it to defeat them? If your goal is to defeat them, that's going to influence how you approach communication. Is your goal just to be heard? I just want to be heard. You don't have to agree, anything like that. I just want to be heard. That's going to affect your communication. Are you trying to get your way? Like, you know, the kids are, that's kind of what their communication is about, I think. But all of us too can fall into that. The point is to get our own way. Or is it to understand each other? These are examples. So maybe the goal is just to try to understand each other, and that's a good conversation. I'm going to argue that these fall short of what the real goal of good communication is. And it's a weird secret, I'd say. And a secret, I just want to say, secrets are, you know, just not known to the population. They don't have to be secrets. There's a danger in going through life looking for secrets, because as soon as you find it and you know it, you'll tend to say, oh, I got it figured out. So it's not a secret. So where's my next one? You probably need a different definition of a secret. You know, it's an insight or understanding that the population at large just doesn't know. So here's the goal of this weird secret: is it'll cure bad communication. It's seldom what we're focused on. So I'm talking about the goal itself of communication. The right goal will cure bad communication. The right goal is seldom what we're focused on. Seldom. It needs to be out in the open between two people or groups. And finally, what is the weird secret? Weird secret is the key to winning the communication game. Winning the communication game only happens when we agree. So the definition I'm offering you is winning equals agreeing. Now, before you get exhausted and can't breathe, just hang in there with me. But that's the game. Winning is agreeing. If two people or two entities or whatever are working on coming to agreement, there's a way to win. If they're not focused on that, then the issue is kind of, if I destroy the other side and they're gone forever, then I win. This is like warfare. And then we'll all agree. Like that happens. So there's a verse in the Bible that's famous about this. How can two walk together unless they agree? And that's how it works. Unless we agree with what we're doing, how do we move anywhere? In fact, I would add to that really all the good things happen when we agree. Like weddings happen because there's agreement. You know, we didn't defeat, but we came to agreement. As we like to say in relationships, it takes two to say yes and one to say no. So the key is to agreement. You want to make agreement the goal. Like in the communication, formally, I'll go over some of this in a minute. You want to make agreement the goal. That what we're trying to do is come to agree, right? How it can go. You can agree with me. I can agree with you. Or we can come to agree with something new. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But we can come to agree, you know, to a third option, a third understanding, etc. But the goal itself is agreement. And it means that you may come to agree with them. They may come to agree with you, Or you may find parts you agree on and then new parts that you both agree to that you weren't thinking at all. Reality is all communication is persuasion. And I can't stress this enough. We don't tend to think this way, but you're always in anything. I'm trying to persuade you now. I'm trying to persuade you with some information to take a whole new approach to your communication process. And by the way, this is a skill, so you're not going to be just super duper, by late afternoon. However, you're going to be on a good path if I can persuade you to pursue it. All communication is persuasion. The kid's trying to persuade you, your boss trying to persuade you, you're trying to persuade your spouse. That's how it goes. Unless it's warfare and you don't care about persuasion and you just want to kill them. Avoiding disagreement is avoiding agreement. So get that in mind. A lot of times we're trying to avoid disagreeing, but that means by doing that, we're actually avoiding agreeing because there's not a way or a path to get there. Now, how to get to agreement? I don't know why I said how to get. Oh, I did say how to get to agreement. Now I see the word both there. Both means this is working both ways. So these elements, it means their turn, your turn type stuff. And it may not be turns, it may be in the head, but this is what's going on or we want to have going. First, agree that winning is when we agree together. Agree that winning is when we agree together. We both have come to agreement. Next, you need to notice that agreeing to disagree is an agreement to lose in communication. We hear this all the time. There ain't no good guy. There ain't no bad guy. There's only you and me, and we just disagree. But we go further and say, we've agreed to disagree on this point. Well, yeah, that's bad communication. That's actually not getting to what you want. It's agreeing to disagree, which I've never really understood this. It means we've agreed not to talk about it, which means we've agreed not to come to agreement about it, which means we've agreed that I get to think I'm right and you get to think you're right. And this area is off limits. So there's something in the relationship that is a problem. Next, you want to realize you are wasting your time if you or they don't want to focus on coming to agreement. So you're actually engaged in an interaction with somebody and they don't want to come to agreement. You're sort of wasting your time. Now, you might start with trying to get what we're trying to do here. Are we trying to agree or not? It's if you think about it, in some ways, this is like negotiation, which is persuasion or making a deal, a business deal. If they don't want to come to agreement, they don't want to sell their thing or whatever, then it's over and done. It's not a problem. It's just a reality. But it's a waste of time if they absolutely are dead solid set that they don't want to come to agreement. They just want you to lose. That's all they want. So in those situations, you're sort of wasting your time until they will come to a place of saying, I want to agree. Same with you. If you don't want to agree, well, then why in the world are you bothering those people? Because that's going to be bad communication, just how it goes. It's warfare. It's not communication. Also, remember, it may not be easy, but it is worth it. It is worth it. So here's what you need to do. First, you want to understand the other's view. You just want to understand their view. And I like to do it and stress that you want to understand their view in such a way that you can explain it to them. They go, yes, you've got it. Because usually you said, let me see if I understand. And you say it and they go, no. And then they nuance and then you repeat with the nuance. And you do that until they go, you got it. You understand my view. That is huge. And it needs to work both ways, as we've said. The next is to explain our view. We want to explain our view to the other person. So we understand their view, explain their view. Those don't necessarily always happen in that order, which is fine. It's just on balance, you're more winsome, more persuasive if you'll first understand and then disagree type thing. So explain our view, then explain the strengths of our view. So you've explained your view, but you want to go back through and say, look, here's why my view, I think it's really strong. And you want to explain what's wrong with the other person's view, the flaws in it. This goes both ways. They're explaining the strengths of their view, right? And the flaws in your view. That's the way it goes. So we're actually really understanding or looking at this whole story. And then you want to agree piece by piece. We agree to this, we agree to this, we agree to this, until you're both winners because you've come to agreement. Or the key sticking point is found, because usually that's what's at issue. And so again, if we haven't come to some kind of a focus on agreement, we don't have a way to get there. And a key sticking point will show up, but that's huge too for the future, because you at least really understand the fundamental nature of the issue, the disagreement, what's going on in the communication. And I think if people can get engaged, that could probably be solved too. A lot of times we drive things to such a black and white, they call it splitting, psychologically, a black and white understanding, that we don't have a good way to get anywhere. And I'm not saying there are not issues like that, but, even if it were an atheist and a theist, if they both agreed to come to agreement, like there is a God, there ain't a God, that's a whole different, wonderful type of communication compared to an atheist that wants to convince everybody that there is no God, or a theist that wants to force all atheists to shut up and repent of their view. That's all I'm getting at. So let's think of some examples just real quick. Your boss. So you have a boss. Part of what I've learned to do with bosses, or as a boss, if I go in or if somebody comes in and they say, hey, look, I'm going to do what you want, regardless. I'm already committed to it. We have that agreement. Yeah, I'm paid to do a job. I'm going to do my job, so I get my pay. If you don't want to do the job, you need to quit the job. That's called being a professional. You do what you're paid to do. But interacting with the boss, trying to come to agreement and up front saying, look, I want us to, my goal is for us to come to agreement. I feel like I'm underpaid. Let's say that's it. And what I want us to get to, if you're interested, is an agreement that I'm being paid what my value is. And engaging in that process is somewhat magical, because if you're not valued, you won't get a raise. Maybe that's impossible or whatever, but if you and the boss agree to your value and then agree on what you should be paid, that's how you got the job anyway. You agreed on what you're going to do, what you're going to get paid. That good things happen when we agree. So stepping into it with that kind of understanding allows the real game to go about what and why you think you should be paid, why you may not think it. It's, something like that. It may turn out you come to agreement that I can't change the pay, but I can change some of your time off or your vacation time, or I don't know, something, who knows? So it's still, that's the focus, especially up front. Let's think about with friends. It's a very similar thing. With a friend, and I've lost friendships over stuff. I suppose you have too. But the nature of it is, again, let's come to agreement. And it's not even, I wouldn't even argue try, though that's fair. We want to try to come to agreement. But what we're really trying to do is figure out how to agree. And it could be anything, some project you want to do together, even going to lunch could be that, because you can't eat together. How can you walk together, or how can you eat together if you don't agree? And so even with a friend, it's a similar thing. Let's come to agreement. Now, what's your view? Let's see if I understand it. Here's my view. Here's what I think's strong about my view. Here's what I think's weak about your view. They do the same thing. And in that time, you start, oh, we found a new fact, a new thing here, and we throw some things out, and suddenly you're coming to a new and fresh spot. It's especially true with kids, though kids are a little tricky, especially when they're younger, because it's bedtime. You want them to agree it's bedtime. Um, you're there could be a third option or something like that, but it's still the same game. So it's like, so you don't want to go to bed, right? And why do you want to go to bed? I'm still playing, right? And yet, I would say we have a bedtime. And what I am saying is that because we have a bedtime and we're consistent with it, what we should do is plan to finish our games and get ready for bed. And I may have let you down there, but this consistent bedtime, we all get a break, we sleep, we wake up fresh. This is how life works. And so, walking through even with a child, this is the bedtime, and here are the reasons for it. Now, if their argument is, I don't want to. And you go, yeah, that's not a good argument because all of us don't want to do stuff. There's all kinds of things like that. That's not actually relevant. Now, we could try to figure out how to get you to want to go to bed, and we could work on that. But again, it's still coming to an agreement. When they're older, teens, they want to go, on a retreat, and you're not sure you like that group or something like that. I don't know. Then you're in the same game, or it might be when a child gets old enough, they want to date. So how do you come to agreement? What's your view on it? What's their view? What's wrong with their view? What's right with your view? We went through that and convinced, had our kids understand that in a certain range of age, dating was never a lone type thing. It could be group type dynamics, but it wasn't really a girlfriend boyfriend world at that point. And we, gave our reasons. They got and we came to agreement. We understood it, and could have had a third option or a fourth, but didn't have to because we were in that process. Same with your spouse on something. I mean, that's how you got married. But coming to agreement is far, far better. And what good communication is really about. And what I've found, Jody and I've found, if she were here, she'd back me up on this one. And that is that most good relationships are marked by a trail of resolved issues. That's how it goes. And resolve means it never comes up again. And that's because we've agreed. So imagine if we talked about how to spend our money and we actually work that through. How do we keep up with the money? How do we take it in? How do we spend it? What do we invest in? How much do we spend on whatever it is? I mean, even as simple as what we spend on the kids for Christmas. We set up a game plan as they age. There's more money set aside for each child, but we stayed within those limits. We were being fair. When you got older, you got more, and the scale worked. So, but she and I agreed to it, and then on presents and what we were going to give the kids, we needed to come to agreement, and that was the goal that we were going for. I think they can call it a win-win or no deal type thing, but it wasn't no deal. It was that we were focusing on getting to agreement. And again, it's the same thing. Let me see if I understand your view. Let me see if you understand my view. Here's what I think is strong about my view. Here's what I think is weak about yours. They go, here's what's strong about my view. Here's what's weak about your view. Going through that process begins to uncover piece by piece, what can we agree on? What do we agree on? What do we agree on? We agree we want to spend this amount. We want to get them something that they want. We want to get them something that will last for a while. We want to get them something that's more educational or helps them with their friendships. I don't know. But going through that process moves you from bad to good communication. And then finally, wonderful last option is Congress. I just thought I'd throw this in here. But, imagine if the goal of Congress was to come to agreement. And we see them doing this on things like when the government's about to shut down and they've got to do a spending agreement, a plan, or what, budget, whatever the game is. They have to work together to come to agreement, and they're doing it piece by piece. They find the sticking points and they resolve them. That's when Congress gets something done because their aim is agreement. The climate we've been in for a while is the aim is for the majority party to protect, bully, push, insist. Sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's an agenda they want, but it has a lot of, we're going to do this with or without you. That's that kind of game. Now, inside their party, either one who's ever, in ascendancy, either party, they have to work on coming to agreements so they have all the votes they need. But it's the same game. If people would start, even in government, trying to say, how can we come to agreement? Not why you're wrong and I'm right, not defeat the other, but actually have an orientation that, look, we're going to win when we can come to something that we can agree on. And that's how legislation and decisions get made. So there's the idea. Winning is about agreement. You get that in your mind and you start working with it. It drives you to be a much better persuader, and it drives you to learn how to allow yourself to be persuadable, because you want a better idea. If they got a better idea, you want it. This is called honesty. Sometimes it's humility, but it's really the heartbeat of really good communication. Okay. Whew. So now with that done, I think I'll stop sharing. We want to ask questions. It could be on this. It could be on anything that is on your mind about parenting, kids, this stuff, communication. Bring up examples, anything that we want to think through together is what we're game to do. So I've got to click a button, and so I can see what you've typed into the chats, and this should work. I have high hopes. So what kind of questions? It could be anything, homeschool, parenting, relationships, all these things that we love to interact about, and especially making the homeschool thrive. That's especially what we care about. Challenges, difficulties, hopes, dreams, etc. What are the kind of things that you are wrestling with? All right, so finally it's up. So here's the chat. London, woo, I can see it. Good morning, good morning. So I'll pop in a hello myself, just so we know what's happening. And what kind of questions you have? What's going on in life? What are you curious about? Stuff we've said before, stuff that's on your mind. I could probably bring up some topics myself, but I just shared a lot of information about communication, and any questions you have about that would be super duper, as they say. All right, so Zeta says, communication, how can I help my kids to make friends with their own peer group? Yeah, so this making friends, this whole thing about friendship is somewhat challenging, but especially because your kids are different and from one another. So how one might make friends can be different than how another makes friends. What we found is part of the key to friendship is, I'll throw out several things. One is, if you want to make friends, you need to be friendly. I'll go slow on that, but if you want to make friends, you need to be friendly. So you want to teach your kids to be friendly. You want them to learn to initiate. But one of the things that we don't notice about friends is there is a natural affinity some of us have for each other. Some of us just like each other more. Can be personality, can be backgrounds, and can be a shared goal. It could be anything. I spent some time with someone yesterday, a new friend. He wanted to visit, and I wanted to visit, and we got together and we hit it off, I guess we would say. There are other people, and that I wouldn't hit it off as easily with. If someone just wants to talk about, monster trucks the whole time, that's going to be a hard thing for me to have a lot of affinity for, you know. So there's some natural attraction that goes on. And with little kids, you need to be the one that pays attention to that. It's not really them noticing. But the other thing to know about friendship, and this is kind of really the secret, the word secret about friendship, is they actually just take a lot of exposure and time together. That's how it works. So I remember when my daughter Laura was in college, and she's very outgoing, very personable, but she wasn't developing any deep friendships. And she asked me about it, and I said, "Well, you're busy with what I would call a pond slime strategy. It's real broad. You're getting to know everybody. You went to a smaller school for that reason. We thought it through. We found that real extroverted, outgoing people in large schools feel more isolated because they can't get to know everyone. Smaller schools, they can get to know everyone. And she did. President's wife, people, team, everything she wanted to know, she could get to know. But the problem, she wasn't continually spending consistent time with someone. And so this is like on the play date level or something where you have some friends you see again and again. The same with your friendships or whatever. If you don't spend some regular time, I'm not talking about every day, but on a regular basis, you can't build a friendship, you can't build a vocabulary together, shared experiences, or much of anything. So I told her, I said, you need to pick out some of these friends and see if they would be game to meet once a week at a coffee shop or something like that and just hang out. And if something happens, you can't meet that week, that's fine, or you can reschedule. But having that set in, I've done this for years, having that set time allowed allows a person to start building a history with someone. So you can set a regular time. It could be monthly. I have people, friends that I'll talk to. We have it scheduled once a month. Get on the phone, just catch up. Sometimes it doesn't work out, usually does. And we built that relationship over time. Well, when she did that, when Laura did this, she actually then started seeing real deep relationships continue to build. Sometimes it happens because you have roommates, and occasionally you get along with your roommate and they become lifelong friends. Well, I know my oldest, Trip, has friends he still stays in touch with that he lived with. And so that's sort of the game, that the time together builds it. And she built those friendships that way. Well, for you and your friends, finding activities, things you can belong to, having them over regularly, maybe they have others over, etc. That kind of stuff, the more consistently you can expose someone, the better it goes. I'll tell one last story, and Jody would own up to this. Jody didn't really have any friends. I mean, Jody was well liked. Who don't like Jody? But she didn't have any deep friendships. And there were a variety of reasons. Her family was especially maybe close, maybe too close. I don't know. It's not me to say, but they had lost Jody's two older daughters, excuse me, two older sisters, and Jody's grandmom all died in a car wreck together. Now Jody was an infant, but that really hits the dynamic of the family system to close somewhat in on itself. And growing up, she would say, I never remember ever going out to dinner, even as a family, but certainly not with friends. They had some Her parents had some friends who would come in, but it was a family thing. So Jody didn't have any friendships. And when we were in seminary, I started thinking about this and school together. And the big deal then was you should be off campus so you meet real people in the world. And I was sitting there going, yeah, I get that. But I had another priority, which is I really felt like Jody needed to get to know some other wives that were in the same world as we were preparing at that time for ministry. And so we went into student housing. And because of that, she could bump into the same people over and over. And over time, what happened was what I hoped happened. She built friendships. So that was a key. That's the value of going to a church or going to a church group or being involved in civic things or something where you see the same people again and again. That's true for kids, true for us. Whew, I went too long on that one. Sorry. But those are my thoughts. Open to anybody else that can or would like to throw anything in there. So good evening. When a child So Jim, good evening from London. Uh, when a child is determined they're right, and it takes a lot of effort to turn their head to what you know to be right, and it has to, I don't know why it does this. It's got this one thing covering it up, has to end up there. Tips on that. It can be exhausting. Yeah. So so you have a kid. Here's what is being described. Then they're determined they're right, and they take a lot of effort to get them to look at what you know to be right, and it's just sort of a battle. So this kind of stuff about like being right is part of where the problem is, because unless you can be wrong, so Carol Dweck's stuff on fixed mindsets is helpful here, but unless you can own up to the possibility you could be wrong, you're in trouble. And but because you're not open, teachable, etc. So what we did, with kids, and even as adults, we're trying to um, get that game clear. So even forcing, here's the funny thing about a kid that's right, getting them to follow what I was sharing and getting them to try to defend or explain their view more than I just want to, or I just think, like, so show me how this works. Your view is this, is that right? And getting it clear. And you go, what's strong about that? You can ask them, why does that make sense? And then you can ask, what's weak about it? You can ask them. So a lot of times I've watched people, when they explain their own view, they convince themselves. So that's one piece. But I would say outright, convince me. Just talk me into it. Be persuasive. Show me how. Because if you're really trying to get to what's right, and especially if you invite them to be a part of it, then going through piece by piece to find out if it's true or not, etc., that'd be great. Here's another piece that I've found very effective with kids and other people, and that is um, try to invite them to think about what would happen if they're wrong. They're insisting on it, but what is the game if it's like, how do you know this is true? The stuff we talked about. Why do you think it's valuable? Try to get an understanding of what they want so they know that you get it. And then you go, well, what if you're wrong? What, but I'm not. Yeah, but that's not what we're doing. We're saying, what if you're actually wrong about this very thing that you claim you want, or that you think you're right about? Uh, how does that pan out, right? And the other piece is sometimes it's taking their logic. If you give me a live example, it's way better. But it's taking their logic and just run it out. So if we do this thing and we keep doing it and keep doing it, I sort of am stumped on the forgiveness of student loans, and I'm stumped because I haven't heard anything, this thing that they're doing with forgiving all these student loans. Um, so first, I know the money has to come from somewhere, I guess, or you just make the schools take it on the chin. Of course, they're public schools, so they're supplemented. But what I don't get is, where does this go in the future? Are we going to keep forgiving them? Does this invite, like, follow the logic? If we make it a regular habit to periodically and randomly forgive certain student loans, uh, then people, I would think, would be incentivized or motivated to get student loans and then to not pay them, because the government will eventually forgive them. That's the gamble. Or do you make college education free? And how does that model really work financially? So it's something I can't wrap my head around, because I'm just looking, and not in the immediate moment, but I'm looking down the road. Doing that with your kids is very helpful. If they have something they want, uh, uh, getting them to think it through. I had that with a son that was had a girlfriend that he quite liked, and they were talking about someday they get married. And I sat with him and I said, well, let's think this through. He was 16. I said, so, or maybe 17. So what's the plan? Uh, well, we'll go to college. We'll get out of college and we'll get married. I said, and y'all are going to go to the same college? He said, no, probably not. And I said, let me see if I understand this. So you got 2 more years, you'll date. You're going to get married in like 6 out there. You're going to go to different colleges, but all that time, you're going to be committed. You're not going to date or do much of anything with anybody else. And y'all are both going to do college separately for a distance for that 4 years or so. And then you're going to come together like you know each other and we want to build a life together. And as he walked through that, it didn't make sense. And I was just sitting there going, you know, I mean, it's your life. I did say that. But I said, this doesn't sound like a really responsible strategy. And I told him, I said, you know, by your age, David had already killed Goliath. He was making some man-like decisions. And as we talked it through, next thing I knew, he was leaving the house and went and broke up, went another direction in terms of what he really wanted in life, because there were some other pieces to it. Well, all I'm saying is getting them to think it through. A lot of times they're not thinking through more than just the moment. You know, their spending is that way too. Just the moment. I want this thing, and then it'll break or whatever. You know, what are you trying to do a little further out with your money? I don't know if that helps, but those are some thoughts. I'm open to others. See if we got a real live example yet. No. So, uh, in large measure, most of these things are a reap as you sow game, like friendships. You just keep sowing to friendships, so you get more. And even on the right and wrong, you keep sowing, you keep visiting an issue, you keep trying to understand what's going on. But especially with kids, I'm just going to tell you, if you can understand their view and then get them to understand your view, like we aren't even at a place. I found this in school. Um, I'd left law school, which was all just defeat each other. And then I went to seminary and we're trying to do something a little more noble. I mean, in my opinion, law's noble, but I'm just saying in terms of ministering to the spirits and lives broadly for people. But I would say to people, I would look at them and I'd go, you know, we can't, because we debate theology, we can't really get to a solution unless I know your view and you know my view. And so let me understand your view and you understand my view. And it was striking. There were a lot of guys that said, never mind, because they really weren't interested in trying to understand something. There were those that did. And the amazing thing I saw is I saw people being able to say, yep, I was wrong. You've convinced me. I've changed my view. And I did too. That's a different kind of character growth where you're just trying to look for what's right and wise, as opposed to I want what I want when I want it. Surely that makes sense. What are the questions? I'm not trying to see here that might be on your mind. Communication, kids, life, math, reading. I will say this, and I've spent some time with an adult a few days ago, showing them how to read. They can read, they're college educated, but not really. And I said, your problem with reading, and I think this is with kids, it's what we have in the reading course, is most people are too busy doing letter by letter and word by word instead of trying to understand the frame of what's going on. So being able to look at something and just knowing what are the key characters, what are their key actions, you know, what are they trying to get to, anything like that allows you to put together what they call a schema. And once you know a schema, you can usually tell the story. So part of what you're trying to do with your kids is get them to back up and look like, who are the main characters? What are they doing? What do they want? And how's this moving through time? So that teaches logic. So when you can get your brain to start thinking that way, your reading comprehension goes up pretty dramatically. EB says, have missed you. Oh, good. Missed you too. been on vacation and time conflicts, but going to look over the last week's sessions. Good. Last week, I think was very helpful, and I appreciate the God bless you for what you do. But last week we talked, if you go back and watch that lesson, we talked about dealing with problems with kids and how you set things up to parent them and how to help them change in a good way. And I sent out a letter to all that are on our mailing list that gave them access to the worksheet that we used, as well as actually there's a copy of this book behind me, wherever it is. Whoops, right there. The absolute quickest way to help your child change. So watching that last week's video is probably worthwhile, the first 20 minutes or so. I mean, all of it, I hope is worthwhile. But where I really walk through, how do you think about what we call the 4 magic questions, how to use them? Probably find that particularly helpful. So, questions, comments, thoughts? I mean, Jody's not here. Just, I know you have questions for her. She'd probably say, be nice. That's what she says to me. All right. Anything else? Looks like y'all are stuffed. I did give you a lot of information, but might be worth going back through. But EB said, woohoo, thank you. Yeah, so look for that. And by the way, if you're new to this channel or new to us, go to independenthomeschool.com, independenthomeschool.com, and there's free stuff there. Just sign up and you get access to how we homeschool. And like I said, the book and worksheet and a little thing on tantrum. There's just some different stuff trying to help the cause. That's what we're up to. All right, pass this along. Hey, wait. Somebody says, I consider putting my curricular up on Kathy Duffy reviews. Yeah, I've been rethinking a lot of things. A lot of what I do with this is sort of ministry. It's not exactly a business, but that's a smart idea. I would say I really, more I've looked at it, I'm going to go back and emphasize the writing course more with people because just so many hundreds of reviews and personal awareness of how somebody just 2 days ago, the girls are going back there and they're so excited about how useful it is. So I'm working in a direction for doing that, like you said with Kathy Duffy and other things. So I do appreciate that. Zeta asks, what's my denomination? So the church I go to is not denominationally affiliated. I went to a school called Dallas Theological Seminary, which is not denominationally affiliated. I was in what's called the E-Free Church at one time as a pastor, in the Evangelical Free Church. What the free means, it's from Europe, and it means they weren't government-controlled churches hundreds of years ago. So that's what the free mean. But I've always said our denomination, our orientations, our Bible type churches it's like half Baptist and half Presbyterian, but the good parts of both, it's something like that. But it's I would say closer to anything. If you go back in history and look at some of the quote denominations or movements, I would be closer in my mind to the Brethren movement. So I would see the value of a smaller group of plural-led leaders trying to look at, just what does the Bible teach instead of an exact denominational agenda. I don't know if that helps. So Jim said, thank you. That makes sense. It's hard to labor on the part of the parent to talk it through. Yeah, and it is, just going back to that. It is, but it's so worth it. And what happens with kids, once you establish a good communication pattern, everything gets easier from then on. It's not, the battles are in the beginning. It's just like potty training. It's a hassle, but once they're trained, you get that time back. So keep communicating. And, more people need to know. That's great. Pass it along. That's what we're up to. Anyway, God bless all of you. I hope this was helpful, and see you next week.